Hello, everybody.
Спасибо. Рад
Thank you.
в этом большом здании.
Glad to see all of you in this place. It's nice to breathe, nice to think. I think we'll spend 30 minutes productively.
Так, начнем. Меня зовут Дмитрий
So
Шмойлов.
let's begin. My name is Dmitry Shmoylov, and in a couple of words, all product security in Kaspersky lab products in our department.
ВБ достаточно давно, еще, да, когда не про...
Long time in WB, information security, even not about safe development, when we have not been speaking about all these things.
Сейчас
We started from classical ones, and right now I'm mostly in product security and everything which is related with the development and security in general. What are we going to speak about?
про что мы...
Few words. Well, I would like to remind you about
Что с этим связано, про
SDL and everything related to it.
софте в первую очередь.
Vulnerabilities in the software, first of all, from the point of view of development,
Критичность.
about their classification and criticality, where do they come from, how can we fight against it, several mechanisms of typical mitigations,
Попробуем обсудить.
and we will try to discuss how much it costs, how can this be measured,
Понимать, сколько безопасности все-таки...
how can we understand how much security do you need in specifically your cases on your level of maturity.
Окей, этому слайду лет 20, наверное.
Well, this slide is about 20 years old, and many people have been saying that it's an old topic. You can lift your hand if you didn't see it,
Аудиторию.
or maybe it's the wrong audience. DevSecOps.
Только о нем и говорим.
Recently, well, we're speaking about this all the time at events like this and audience like this. Nothing new.
Просто
I
задать.
will skip it,
Будем говорить.
and I will give the topic, what are we going to speak about in general?
Ну и почему мы
And why
безопасны?
are we speaking about security errors in the code? Well, the source usually
Библиотеки так называемые, как
is third-party libraries, and how did they get in the code? It's very understandable. Where the impact comes from, it's also understandable. Approximately something like this. And if you're going to get involved into this, the volume of problems is like this.
рабочие
That's how it looks like in a working condition
библиотеками мы пытаемся.
when the third-party libraries
Но мы
are
немножечко
used
сегодня
to check it.
про
Well,
более
today
вещь поговорим.
we are about deeper thing, about reasons.
Про классификацию.
But in the beginning, we are going to speak about classification of these libraries,
И
errors,
чтобы не спорить об
and
сначала мы давайте
not to argue about definitions. Let's try to
что такое все-таки баг с точки
understand
разработки.
what is a bug from the point of view of development and what is a vulnerability. Once again, bug is a violation of staff functioning. In any reasons, some unclear results, they should be there, clear and understandable. But vulnerability
Связанная
is something related to some weakness of the software.
должен быть неавторизованный доступ. Она должна быть
There should be unauthorized access. It has to be exploited, and there should be a concept of the surface of attack. It also present here.
там, становится.
Without the threat surface, it's not exploited
Сейчас вот
as a rule.
пока поговорим про классификацию уязвимостей.
And right now we will speak about classification of vulnerabilities, and I will tell you a little bit more about this.
Как можно риски и те самые уязвимости пытаться
How risks and vulnerabilities can be classified so that we don't fix everything
невозможно.
one after another, because it's impossible to fix everything. There are different methodologies which can tell you
Либо критично.
either criticality of the risks or criticality of specific vulnerabilities, CVSS. And the first thing that comes to my mind, everybody says, oh, this vulnerability with CVSS 9.8, okay, let's run and fix it, blah, blah, blah.
Уязвимости.
We are coming back to the definition of vulnerability. Is it on the surface of attack?
Штука тоже
Not always this thing also works. In addition to that,
занимаются.
practical experts who are involved in this
А правильно ли оценен
skeptically look at this. Have we properly evaluated the scoring of this vulnerability? Have we properly talking about this? For example, Stride, Microsoft, also 20 years old of this methodology. This is more classification. Also, this question, does it work? It doesn't work. Well, this is more about risk assessment, whether it's good or bad, what should be fixed first of all, and everything which is related to this. You cannot get around it, but most likely it's about classification. Everything's wonderful and proper. However, it's not always tells you where should you run in the beginning. But let's see, what are we paying this money for? Well, the money are paid for, as an example, in the development. As for the development of applications, they pay for the code execution repair. Microsoft pays money sometimes, big numbers, for privilege increase. What Apple speaks about it? Apple has 100,000, 250,000. And first of all, they are interested in problems related to exploitation through network interfaces, when all the way so that user doesn't do anything. They call it zero-click policy. And they are paying for this, which tells us that this is critical. Why am I speaking about it? How can we find the most critical things? Well, self-PR a little bit in the beginning, because we also are paying because we do have things like that. But if we take CWE, perhaps if you're sitting here, you've heard what it is. This is about those same weaknesses. This is classification of problems which can lead to vulnerability in many CVEs. There is a specification to CWE in order to understand what is the reason for this. And I would like to show you what can be the reason and what can be done to these. Top 25 looks like this, and we see here the work with memory, we see secure and unsecure design, we see logical errors, and we have similar RCEs, but in the end run, it looks like, first of all, the following things are critical: code execution, and we are going to emphasize on this by preventing the code execution, raising the privileges. Classics, first you get established, then you raise the privileges. In the terms related to offenses, they are speaking about it during the whole day. And of course, when we are able to find certain data, if there is a sensitive data, it's the end impact of complete attacks. So we, from the side of the AppSec, we will try to fight against this thing by different methods. We will freeze it a little bit, and then I will get distracted a little bit into explanation of why everything happens like that. Can anybody recognize this elderly man on this slide? Well, I'm not going to take your time. It's Isaac Newton. What he's doing here. I would like to make an example and give you an answer to the question why. We can have these errors and vulnerabilities on the first law of mechanics, and especially in that part that the body is not working when nobody influences it. The forces are equalized. Okay, let's take a vector which strives for the entropy of the code and bugs. And our application is located somewhere on the x value of this vector. And we will explain the first law of this mechanics. In the end result, at the moment of the release, your application is at a certain value of this vector. Therefore, on the right side, they are pulling a new code in this vector, the increase of the entropy, bugs, and everything related to it. But in the end one, you're pulling to the quality of the code by tests, no matter how they are. And therefore, the priorities of specific problems, they can look like that. If you are looking at the probabilistic analysis of this, it looks like that. And if you look at problems which we are trying to prevent, they look like that. RC, the highest criticality because it's a remote execution of code, which we cannot control at all. Maybe LP is a little bit lower, local privileges elevation, and denial of service, well, that's understandable story which can be mitigated by different means. And inside of each vector like this, I will explain you a little bit differently how can we mitigate all those things without getting connected to these arrows and vectors, because if we'll take the scale through these measurements, it's not going to be really compliant, but the scheme shows you how it works. Static dynamic analysis, different types of security testings, which have to increase the quality and move the probability of appearance of this error to the left. And the new code, no matter how it's going to be, we are making those releases, moves it towards the right. In the LP, we might have the sandboxing, and I'm going to speak about it a little bit more. And all the same things are happening here. But speaking about DOS, well, I can speak about Watchdog. We can fight against this.
Слайд капитана очевидность. Чем больше тестов, тем лучше.
The captain obviousness slide, the more tests, the better it is. It's like that, but the question is about the quality. Okay, let's try to think about what should we fix. What should we do as a first priority? It's a classical table, critical resources or critical vulnerabilities. That's how it looks like. And if we are speaking about the development of an application, it looks like that approximately. And each of the layers of potential threat can be moved in the right or left direction. And by tests, we are moving it in the direction of left. And what the industry does from this point of view, basic standard tests, unit tests, fuzzing, statistical analysis, dynamic analysis, code review, using safe languages, and we still don't get 100% guarantee. Today, we already been speaking several times in this conference towards the design secure by design approach. No matter how we speak about it, but from the point of view of development of the application, highly loaded applications I'm speaking about, or those that work with high level of privileges. Secure by design approach is going to speak about exchanging high priority problems to low priority problems. RCE will be replaced by some DOS. What is to be done for safe by design approach? Well, separation by security domains, like 1.5 minutes, I'll speak about it because this topic is a very interesting topic, and this is the topic in this direction you have to move. According to our opinion, architectural analysis, minimization of code base, and everything related to it. A very good article. I recommend it personally, especially Google guys also recommend it. It's the rule of two. If you use unsafe languages when you're trying to manage memory. In your application, you can process unsafe, unsubscribed, unsigned input from any person in the internet, and all this works with high privileges. It's very bad. Don't do that. Good practice that can check you, and you can prioritize potential problems which might happen in your application later. A very good article, and I would like to recommend to each one of you for reading. And conclusions from this article are speaking about the following. And Google guys for their browsers are showing this specific sandboxing. If you will open Chrome, that's what you're going to see. Sandboxes of various processes in order to reduce the impact. It's the substitution of remote code execution by DOS.
Но
For example, a tab has been dropped in the browser, but the user most likely have not suffered from it.
идут
And
подходы и не
that's the direction of our movement approaches, not only in the Google.
приблизительно
Niels methodology speaks about the same isolation, minimization of interfaces.
Итак, основные вектора у нас локальные в удаленном.
So the main vectors, local, remote, logical errors, and it's desirable to apply security by design. It would be very good. And we have determined from the point of view of criticality where to run and how to run. But right now, let's go to the main topic of my presentation, which is how much it costs and how can we work with all of this.
Я снова возвращаюсь к Исааку Ньютону.
Once again, I would like to come back to Isaac Newton and the first law and vectors again. But the vector of the price of development. For example, let's take the vector of new development and classical situation for the development, which is related to the fact that resources are always
И тем более там баг.
limited and there are lower of them than requests. Requests are just flowing upon you
С другой стороны,
abundantly. Bugs are dropping abundantly from the other side, and all this has to be
давайте
befriended.
попробуем забить.
Okay, let's try to forget about it. It's a very old slide related to incidents.
Black Monday, может быть, кто-то...
Black Monday, maybe some in this audience have not been born when it happened, but these are bugs for billion.
За счет того, что
The market of shares have been dropped because just new robots which are buying and selling have been produced, and robot has calculated, okay, the market went down, okay, let me sell all the shares, and all the robots have been doing that. And in result, in 2
появилась
days, that was the picture.
остановка торгов, все...
They came to conclusions, they stopped sales, everybody knows about it, but
А еще
the initial reason was there.
он очень
And here's another bug, but it was very indicative.
европейскую ракету.
European rocket exploded. Many people heard about it. 96, it's so old.
Показательно здесь что?
But what's indicative about it is that they have conducted investigation and they've said what was the main reason. The reason was in copy-paste of the code, changing the variability of variables, and the rocket has not properly calculated the trajectory. Technically, everything worked perfectly. $500 million for the
Не долларов, а евро.
hardware was lost, not dollars, but euros in those days. Okay, let's go back to our code.
А внизу уже стоимость.
Once again, entropy in the head, and at the bottom, the
Мы
cost.
всегда находимся
Conclusion.
в
We
ситуации,
always are in a situation of the resource deficit. What is to be done about it? Prioritization and understanding
четко
of
концентрироваться. Да, в первую очередь.
what should we concentrate on. First of all, we should find the main thing. We need a bison.
В процессе
But
работы
what does it mean? You can train on these little kitties and small projects, then you start implementing with the most important resources in the production. Please don't do everything, and then something that works, implement. Decompose the big goal into small pieces. Well, you don't have to fry the whole bison all at the same time. Work on small targets and small goals, then separate them with the development teams if you're OPSEC, but if you're a developer, it's understandable for you. Then evaluate the result.
Как делаем?
How do we do it?
Состояние,
Analysis of the current condition, detailed plan. Well, it's plus minus for the project management. This is very understandable. Captain obviousness. But in order to understand on the level of the company, how can we build these processes? We need to understand the current condition, in which direction we run, and what are the money that we have to be responsible for.
С точки зрения,
But what do we have from the point of view?
которые уже
What are the smart people telling us, those who've been working on this topic previously?
измерения.
How can we do all these measurements? Well, it's understandable that not only our experience should be looked upon, but we also have to look at the foreign experience. Well, this is old slide, but many people follow this because
Забытое старое.
it The new things are well forgotten old things. Well, there are certain standards. You can dig in those standards, but they do not give you direct reply to your questions.
Этот фреймворк, вот это прям
And this particular framework,
очень
this
хорошая
is
проработанная
a
вещь.
very good, well thought thing, which can be used
Как у меня
to understand
с моими
what about my situation with my
с моими активами,
processes, with my assets, with
внедренными практиками.
my practices that I have implemented.
Классно описано то, что
And it well describes
оценка
the
процесса.
fact that we don't have just process assessment, we have assessment of the depth of this process.
Это количество
I dislike only one thing, the number of requirements inside, and I will speak about it a little bit later. However,
фреймворка
from the point of view of framework,
использовать
you can take it and use it.
уже
Do the self-assessment,
показатели.
and then you'll get some indicators. Even though there is a separate page in this beautiful assessment document
Куда
where you are right now and the direction you want to move to.
Если денег много,
But if you have a lot of money and if you're ready for this activity, then you can move in this direction as well. Well, it's expensive, it's a closed framework,
методология,
it's a closed methodology which is used by a lot of auditors. SP 800, Series 53, and their framework according to the risk assessment, most likely. But what I like about this, it's a so-called community profile, and this is why I decided to include this slide into my presentation. So what they've done, they created the possibility for various companies to build their own stairways
безопасности в каждой конкретной
on how much security is enough for every practical approach. So what about our case?
джитов,
And I would like to speak about G framework,
тоже
an Excel spreadsheet which calculates, they've described it, they created it, wonderful, beautiful. Well, it was really good job.
есть пресловутый
Also,
разработки.
we have a secure development ghost and everybody started forgetting, falling asleep because of it, but it was reprocessed and changed in the course of this year. Well, they've been working on it last year, and this year it will be explained with all the practical applications, and I will explain it to you in more detail, and you will understand why it is important. And afterwards, right now they're developing a new standard on methodology of assessment of maturity in the realization of the safe development processes and framework. This framework will take into consideration everything that I've said above.
56939
56939,
была не просто
the development working group, a new edition, not even a paper document, but also took into consideration experience of many other companies in this working group, and they have closely been working on this standard. We've been reprocessing it and working on it and reviewing it, and we have reviewed it very seriously from the point of view of the concept itself. We need to have a safe development. Well, it's like that since the beginning, but from the point of view of pieces of this standard,
несколько по-другому. Новые
we see new areas that were proposed to this standard because a lot of time have passed since the beginning of the first standard in this area.
что-то отредактировано.
New things, some edited things, and
В итоге
in the end run,
достаточно сильно переработанные документы.
we have acquired a very different document from practitioners, not only from us, but also from those companies that were on the slide. What's good about it? Well, in each of these practical goals, there are requirements like were available in the old GOST, but right now in the new one, in the composition, we have the composition of artifacts and the criteria of understanding. Did you get the finish or not? It's a framework one, but very soon for the maturity assessment, it's going to speak about how
56939 он структура
closely you can measure it. Well, 56939, the structure of all its interrelations looks like that. And if you look, the connections of the requirements, artifacts, criteria of acceptance, they look like that.
И еще раз проговорю про то, что планируется.
Once again, I would like to tell you what is being planned. Next year, it will be in a public discussion. Right now, we're going to have discussion inside of the working group this year about the maturity assessment and how it's going to look. Not just like, okay, guys, you have to do the dynamic analysis like previously, but the dynamic analysis has to be these. You should use these tools. They have to be launched this way.
И дальше
The coverage should be this big. And then you select yourself.
для вашей
How
конкретной
much do you need for your specific company?
разные уровни зрелости, разные требования.
Different levels of maturity, different levels of requirements, and then you can build a roadmap.
Что будут определенные
So it is assumed that there will be certain levels of maturity which you can use as a basis.
поддержка руководства, расширение практики
The
тоже.
basic one, support of the top management, extending, this is really mature one, and some advanced level when we are doing these things like these guys from Google, or we in a separate area. We have applied all possible tools. We've covered our code with 100% coverage. We created mathematical model and we have proven that it works. And for the security means it's normal approach. For some web applications and microservices, this might be an overhead.
Построение
And in our plans, we are going to build this profile approach where you can add to yourself
разделенные
an axis. This is requirements divided by certain areas, level of maturity of the background graph, and of course various profiles. For the bank, you can do one thing. For the
в принципе все
aviation industry, you can do something else. But all the approaches
повышению безопасности
to
кода
increasing the safety of your code are really understandable, and that's why we need this flexibility.
да, и понимание, куда можно бежать.
Yes, and understanding in which direction you have to run.
По этому же пункту можно делать
Therefore, following this particular link, you need to do the web analysis for yourself. The orange requirements is something that can be given by regulator or by some internal compliance department, or
повышать
your own desires to improve your level of maturity and visualization for the future of your roadmap development.
Вот этот слайдик из у вас
This slide,
все очень близко и также
everything's very
еще
close, and the only thing that is missing in this SAM is digitalization and higher level of requirements. I've been showing you the slide about dynamical one, and there are approximately 20 of them. And the same about practical approaches from some. They have 3-4 requirements. Do you do it? Well, I do it, but a little bit of it.
такой мы у себя в
The graphical representation is like this. In our company, we've been building this even without much. We've been building these diagrams to understand the difference of maturity of different teams, because we have a lot of development teams and we have approached it ourselves. And in new GOST, we will share our experience, practical experience, of course, looking back at the industry so that we wouldn't have only single company approach. And what do we see? We see this
направлений не до бегания
disharmony in some area
это тоже
and overreach in some other requirement. Well, I think it's going to be the end of my presentation. You can read URLs for all the tools which are useful. I've collected them on this particular slide.
Кому тема интересна, готов к вашим
If you're interested in this topic, I'm ready to your questions. Thank you very much for your attention. Those of you who want, there is a QR code where you have to write your questions. The colleagues will read it from the table PC. Please evaluate this presentation, whether it was interesting, not interesting, did you like or didn't like. I'm ready to answer your questions. I love good questions. I have some merchandise for good questions from your side. And after the presentation, I will give it to you. So thank you very much.
Спасибо, Дмитрий. Переходим к вопросам. Thank you, Dmitry. Let's get down to the question. Thank you very much for your presentation. Why did you only mention 3 vectors in the beginning of presentation? What are your selection criteria, and why didn't you include the injection? I understand the questions. Good questions.
Заготовочка, готов к этому вопросу.
I was prepared.
Я специально показал,
It's on purpose that I demonstrated
скажем так, низкоуровневые, для которых
applications that are low level,
важны, когда злоумышленник у нас
for
находится
which increased
в операционной системе, где
authority rights are also important, where
связано с
the malfactors at the level of application, execution, everything related to the injection, HSS,
они доступны,
occupy an important place on the list of vulnerabilities because they are broadly available to all kinds of intruders.
проблемы победить,
However, to address the root cause,
потому что в конечном итоге
I decided to focus on those particular problems. If we take an XXL, for example,
к тем же проблемам, да,
will result with the same problems. Why this XSS? Because there is an error at the input, and we will require dynamic analysis and static analysis to mitigate.
окей, если нет, дозадайте, пожалуйста.
Oh, well, if I have answered your question, it's okay. Otherwise, clarify, please. Now we can proceed to the questions from the floor.
Может, ребятам туда отдать микрофон?
Добрый день, Дмитрий. Большое спасибо за доклад. Было очень интересно.
Good afternoon, Dmitry. Thank you for your very interesting presentation.
Делать. А не могли бы рассказать,
You
как не надо?
mentioned what should be done. How about what shouldn't be done? You have great experience. What are the most spread mistakes?
Система, она как бы, ну, и информационная система в частности,
The system and
как бы там в
the information system in particular
тысячи
runs according to a certain algorithm in a certain environment. And there are tons of mechanisms to make it run incorrectly. And there is only one way to make sure that it runs correctly. There are lots of wrong advice. Well, some commentators
да, если к-
can show how bad code can be written. This question should go to open source.
громкие ЦВЕ,
I will anonymize.
Log4j. Ребят, зачем? Зачем сделано было
Guys, why
проблеме, которая потом стрельнула? Да, вот вопрос.
was it done in such a way as to
Сказать, там, например,
trigger a problem?
она затаскивала одну из open source
Some time ago, one of the teams was importing an open source library.
анализ ее перед тем, как, ну, через security.
After a thorough analysis,
Мы поняли, что, ну, вроде функционал заявлен.
we understood
Нормально.
that the functionality was right and everything was okay with the licenses. However, when we analyze the code,
Это вообще в open source, и как не стыдно вообще
it was a real mess.
выкладывать. Много
Who could write it?
вещей, и общий ответ на это вопрос.
It was a shame posting such a code
Не
in
надо.
open source.
Там есть, конечно,
Let's open
сложные вещи, действительно, потому что сложные системы пишутся, и
the volume of bad practices, and we'll find it there.
комментарии, о котором говорит,
Of course, to identify those problems, the tools are required that are being discussed currently.
конкретно я вам не...
You understand?
Ну, там,
Well, unfortunately, I'm in no position to give you more specific information.
неправильно.
Errors such as overflow, incorrect
Просто
memory operation,
об этом я...
all those are just a few types of problems.
Добрый день, спасибо за доклад. При ограниченности ресурсов
Good afternoon, thank you for your presentation. With limited resources, what's more important,
и даст или
buying
экспертная оценка
and uploading mechanisms to the SAS, or shifting the burden to specific employees? Neither yes nor no. Security is a complex thing. Of course, one needs to use the tools. They make your code cleaner. However, without a good analyst who understands those tools well, it will be like a monkey with a grenade, or planetary entropy, or heating the air in the server room. Yes, we need SS, we need DS, we need to construe those things in a proper way. What automation tools are used to evaluate vulnerabilities? And
давайте, наверное, опять в open source.
How good is their output? I'll get back to open source once again.
Стандартный композиционный анализ.
It will be clear. Let's take standard composite analysis. We've been using it for a long time.
Еще не было.
And even the notion of composite analysis still didn't exist when we already use this procedure. This tool set is necessary, and everyone today understands that it's important to update the code received from open source. And again, my answer will be the same. We shouldn't ignore the tools that improve the quality of your code. However well or badly they work. What's the baseline for us? What are the most important things? Oh, I understand what you mean. If you're here in this room, I'd like to say thank you to you for this question. You can approach me offline. Now, look, there are two options. If there are high-level requirements to a product, certification, for example, or there may be requirements of some app store, this will be the baseline to look at. You can provide slightly better or be slightly beneath it. There may be some gap. If it's a high-level requirements is beyond your company's control, but there is also internal compliance.
Производится оценка общей зрелости соответствующих.
Who sets the targets? It depends on your company, your maturity level. It can be operation security. It can be your internal development unit, such as an architecture committee or expert group that may be telling you where you should find yourself. For instance, we should improve the quality of our code for this and this scenario. What do we need for this? In some 90 or 80 or 30% of cases, we need that these tools yield us 0 bugs. Is it achievable or is it not? What's admissible and what's inadmissible? It's up to experts to work on it. Where those experts should be, it's up to you to decide. Sometimes it's the OPSEC who sets this rule. It's always about reaching an agreement with the developers and security people. How relevant are legacy technologies from the perspective of security development?
Будем считать методологией старых лет?
Should we consider SDL a legacy technology or methodology? They describe the key areas, provide guidelines. We hear reports at information security conferences, and those speakers say yes, they are relevant. Where is the breaking point?
достаточности ресурсов,
or the cutoff line where we can say
количество
it's enough.
которые там могут добежать до этой.
How big is the number of developers capable of reaching the threshold?
Повышаем
We have our internal practice
тот уровень,
when we
просим от команд
raise the level
критических областей.
we require from our developers in the critical areas.
В общем и целом, там, да, актуально.
From the perspective of methodology, yes, they are still relevant, although they need to be adapted.
Что делать, если
And the new Ghost version is the good example. What should be done
Как быть, если
if
единицы, в том числе отечественные?
Ghost and other standards set up
Кто-то уже прочувствовал.
too high the requirements for new tools?
Мы
Yeah, I see some people can already feel the pain. Don't hesitate to approach me.
что с этим делать? Ну,
It's our pain as well.
советовать
What should be done?
То есть вы
First of all,
говорите про
don't be silent.
процесс сертификации, потому что это то
For
самое.
sure, you're talking about certification. This is a rule imposed from above. You shouldn't stay silent. Provide your feedback and comments to the regulators.
Да, у нас там для средств
There may be several regulators.
банковской,
It's SEC for protection tools, for example, while for the banking,
в общем,
it's the central bank.
говорить о том, что
By and large,
есть,
one should always say, speak out,
к ним прислушиваются. За последние годы вот
mention the problem,
комьюнити,
and they'll be heard. In the recent years, the engineering community,
которая,
has been serving as a kind of trigger.
я, наверное, скажу это слово, да, которая
I'll pronounce this word,
сделала возможным там подвижение вправо-влево относительно
that made it possible
бумажных изначально
to
требований.
introduce
В общем,
changes,
там, не молчать,
amendments to the paper-based regulations. So
достижимо,
don't keep silence.
не стоит, потому что, ну,
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to speak up.
инфекционная лаборатория это дело увидит с точки зрения там,
In any situation,
вещи,
if it's about certification, the certification lab will see it.
измеряем, здесь видно не
You should make the problem measurable.
Когда все-таки ждать заявленные ГОСТы?
When should we anticipate all those ghosts?
уйти в,
63739
господи, как это называется,
is expected to
Роспатент, не патент, ну, короче,
be escalated to the organization that's in charge of introducing
количество времени
technical amendments,
с точки зрения этого организации по,
and it will not take a lot of time
во всяком случае, регулятор говорит именно так,
to update
к этому
the standard. According to the regulator claims
как бы текст, вот там 99% завершен.
going to do their best.
Слушаниях на
I think that by the fall, at least the public hearings will be over.
Разработчика у вас.
How many obstacles do we have per developer?
тоже спасибо.
And again, a complicated question. Thank you very much.
Чистого обсека вот в общем
Speaking about pure
у нас 12
operation security guys, it's a pretty small team, about 12 people. But there is a big but.
это
But
называется институт
word.
security чемпионов. Вот
It's called the Security Champions Institute.
направление разработки. То есть, например, есть один
In terms of development areas, there may be one champion
все такое. А есть
per several teams,
3-4 security чемпиона.
or there may be
У нас
3 to 4 security champions per product, and we have
отдельная
products
security
with 7 champions,
продукта.
complete security teams named after the product they're in charge of.
У нас делегировано на уровень security чемпионов, поэтому я вам
We delegate a lot of work
сказать,
to the security champions level,
ну,
so it's very difficult to give you the exact head count.
но он отвечает
Those security champions don't spend 100% of their time on security.
куча тасок, которая распределяется по
They are responsible or many other tasks that may be distributed among mature developers who are also responsible for security.
Стейкхолдерам, чтобы это не выглядело
How to sell all those metrics to stakeholders to make them clear-cut.
в попугаях, но в конечном итоге
Well, for the stakeholders,
бьет.
it will not be clear-cut anyway.
Но
I
человек,
think that we should measure
да?
in man-hours.
А вот
That is what we're going to spend.
доклад до меня Света как раз говорила Газизова.
Two presentations before, Svetlana Gazizova
Это там те самые как бы
mentioned
в конечном
boogeyman stories.
качество кода.
It has vulnerabilities. In the end of the day, we sell quality code to the stakeholders.
Спросит, ребят, а качество кода
And the stakeholders will fairly ask,
там, в багах,
how do you measure the quality of your code?
а к чему это приведет? Будет
Do you measure it in bugs?
вообще?
And
В конечном итоге, да, нужно
how can we measure the result to find out if it's good or bad?
импакт, вот те самые
Yes, we have to demonstrate
готовы
the potential impact, those OPs.
продукт, короче, использовать в своих интересах злоумышленники или нет. И что как бы для этого нужно?
Well, to demonstrate if our product can be used by intruders or not,
К тому, что там
and what they may need for it,
процессы нужно это делать постоянно, но как бы
but without explaining to the stakeholders that it's a process and it should be done continuously,
у нас там вот
they will never understand it.
больше ничего не надо, да?
It will always remain unclear to them.
Не так. Значит, нужно вместе с руководителем разработки к этому приходить.
We have to work together with our development lead,
Если происходит
and we need to join forces.
и тэшниками,
If there is competition between security people and IT people, between developers and OPSEC, well,
дополнять друг друга.
it will be bad practice. These units
Спасибо.
should be friends and work together. Thank you.
Необходимости импортозамещения.
How to arrange DevSecOps
Без условий
amid
ну вот
import substitution. It should be done the same way as without import substitution.
у нас в России нету наших
If we say that
конкретных
we don't have in Russia our own
почему
domestic tools, why should this be an obstacle? It's important
на которых
to build quality and security gateways based on which proper checks can be carried out. How to do it and
здесь уже вопрос от бюджета. Да,
in what quality, it may depend on the budget.
добежать хотим. Но если нет ничего и сделать хотя бы что-то,
And
вперед.
our final ends.
Когда этот гейт организуете, вы сами поймете,
Once you've put such a gate
и
in place, you will understand easily
у нас нету российского
what is sufficient and what's necessary. You can say, we don't have our domestic tool for this particular practice, or for some reason we don't trust open source.
гейта, он сам рассосется у вас этот вопрос, потому что этот гейт начнет вам приносить
If you have proper security gate,
результат
the question will be eliminated on its own.
плачевным последствиям. И дальше вы увидите этот профит. Кстати, этот профит нужно тоже показывать.
You will see the profit. And this profit should be demonstrated to the stakeholders.
Разработки с небезопасными конструкциями, насколько детализировано.
How do you work with unsafe structures?
Вы
And
закрываете
what is the level of digitalization?
для разработки с
How do you meet the guidelines of the GOST standard?
Во-первых, инструкции, во-вторых, обучение девелоперов.
Firstly, there are instructions. Secondly, we provide training to our developers, teaching them what's good and what's bad.
Обучением и
We provide our reports on training and code review.
на самом деле вопрос скорее
To be
всего,
brief,
глубокий, если
but it may be a deeper question. And if the author of the question is in this room, don't hesitate to approach me afterward.
предыдущим гостям
Afterwards,
требования были для проектного подхода в разработке.
the previous GOST standard
Используются скорее
contained requirements for development, while the present one proceeds from agile.
жизненного цикла пытались
It's on purpose that in the new version we departed from the life cycle stages.
цикла. Именно поэтому структура
It's not a good idea to be bound by the life cycle stages.
там может
Well, practice
спор относительно того, что там статический анализ
can be done at any stage.
Ребят,
Saying that a static analysis should be done prior to the release, well, it gives rise to a lot of questions.
отказались от
Practice dictates something different. That's why we gave up the life cycle stages. And the question should go to the quality of the code. Is my understanding correct that security champions are the developers engaged in security?
как минимум они раньше были разработчиками точно.
Well, in the past at least, they should have been developers.
Без
My answer is,
который
he's not a pure information security guy. He's a developer
путь уже там
who may have completed a huge journey,
безопасности сначала там просто как бы, ну, про это прямо отдельная была презентация
many years
на прошлом ПХДС
in the security domain. By the way, last year,
про это. Но в общем и целом
And,
это бывшие разработчики сейчас.
this event, I made a presentation devoted to it. Yes, they are former developers, at least senior developers or architects. And their job descriptions, do they include anything
Интересуется
concerning security?
выполнение какого-то комплайенса.
Well, the person asking this question must be concerned about compliance.
И понимаю,
Well, I'm trying to wrap my head about it,
вот
and I understand that
за исключением своего отдела не читал. И
probably I've never read any instruction devoted to it. I'm in no position to answer this question. However, I'm 90% sure that the answer should be no.
не строится на должностной
No,
инструкции.
people's motivation is not based on job description. It's based on different principles.
Ну, как бы там прописаны вещи, да, что ты там отвечаешь за там свой проект.
Yes, there may be provisions such as you're responsible for a project.
Всех пунктов там не
What
перечислено.
does it mean?
Если вы будете
Well, you will not find exact bullets there. Like
динамический анализ своего кода и
you are to run your code dynamic analysis and fix bugs.
инструкцию, наверное, не улучшится.
Well, I don't think that your job descriptions or guidelines will be improved if you include such things. So, will you give me more details regarding proper motivation? Well, it's topic for a separate discussion.
Аудитории интересно.
I'd love to discuss it,
Это интересно.
but we don't have time for it. Show me your hand, those of you who are interested in this. Good, good.
Вот ровно такой
It may be
вопрос был в прошлом году.
a brief lecture. I got the same question last year at the Security Championship section. And this year, I'll probably say the same. It's the same motivation as
За свой код.
what motivates the developer to come up with a good code,
В конечном итоге
not to be ashamed of it, for the code to be
я написал тот самый
modern, advanced,
который сейчас
for the developer to feel cool.
им
I have
пользуются все на свете.
written
Мой код
a
оперирует
perfect code with huge install base,
цифровых денег на какой-нибудь там площадке.
thousands of people using it,
Да, и он,
or generating billions of dollars
ну и здесь чуть-чуть
on a certain platform.
приплетается уже безопасность.
The security is also involved to a certain extent.
Там, не просто на команде, но вот конкретно на тебе, уважаемый Иван.
And it's not just the team that's responsible for security.
Да, оно
It's more specific.
постепенно
It's you, dear developer. It's you who are responsible for it. Yes, this approach
продуктовой безопасности потом
is becoming more and more spread.
вот такое решение,
But I'm afraid that for this solution,
скажем так,
guys
да, такие
from product security
переписки до нас потом добираются, когда security чемпион
may break my legs.
У меня тут конфликт интересов, я с одной
A
стороны
security champion may come
функционал,
and say, look,
а с другой стороны тут
I'm facing conflict of interest. I'm part of the team
это порешаем. И
and I'm responsible for functionality, while my team members,
мотивация
they are suggesting something crazy.
может давить, что надо сделать.
Well, this motivates to
Принципом это.
doing good job.
Хотя, в принципе, могу и сделать.
Well, on the one hand,
Молчать и сделать.
I could go for it, but on the other hand, it's against my principles
Человека за качество
and the individual responsibility for the quality and security itself. The first person we come to
бага и
with
безопасности это к security чемпиону.
a security bug is the security champion.
Это там занимает
Let's forget about SaaS triggers. It's up to the developers. However, if we take
результаты.
complex technology problems, if redesign is required, or threat modeling
разработки безопасного ПО, идем ли мы по
from the perspective of secure software development, are we following the footsteps of Western companies, or we mostly rely on the local specificities? Well, you know the answer to this question really well. Yes, we take them and their achievements into account, although there are country-specific features as well.
В общем и целом, если там ни с кем
Without taking the other's experience into account,
такие как гости, то
or without taking into account local specific features, will be stagnating. Yes, we take into account both the international experience and the local specificities.
у нас это актуально и наоборот.
In other countries,
пример?
people may be closing eyes on some things which are relevant here. Could you give us an example?
Специфика, ну,
Do you mean the international experience or Russian specificities?
опасные фразы в open source.
Okay,
Там, никто
take all those scary phrases from open source.
не заморачивается, для них это не проблема.
I don't think that people in the West care for them. It's not a problem to them.
России касается.
Research guys say this problem is not only relevant for Russia,
Когда
it's still present in other regions as well.
говорим, там государство не видит этой проблемы,
If we look at it at a government level,
регулировать не будут. Когда
if the government doesn't see a problem,
подвергать
it wouldn't regulate it, and the other way around.